Good afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for returning after lunch. That makes it a lot less awkward for us. Yeah, we'll try to make it worth your while and try to cut through the after lunch narcosis with an exciting topic. Tell us what you think about it. There's a QR code. You can see the results then later in the other room on screen. Let's dive right into it. Let's start with a short introduction of our panelists. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what is your background, what's your view on it, and feel free to provoke a little bit, right? That we get the pulse rate up a little bit right after lunch. Benedikt, why don't you go first?
Yeah, thanks. Benedikt, my name is Benedikt Niepötter from Arcondis. I'm leading our Omnichannel engagement consulting group there. And yeah, I've been in digitalization in pharma for about the last 10 years, having completely different background, which I'm not going to bore you with. So if you want to have that, come later and ask me. One of our questions is like, king is dead. So why is the king dead? I guess everyone knows this content is king phrase. But I think there is actually just one king, and that should be the customer. And if the customer is king, then content can't be the king. And I think actually content is king is actually putting the wrong perspective on it. It's very much about my content, what I want to tell. And when we're talking about customer experience, they want to be taken care of. They don't want to be thrown at with content. So therefore, I think customer is king, not content.
Thanks, Benedikt. Cyril, do you want to go next? And I'm sure you have a view whether we actually care about the consumer, the customer enough.
Yes, thanks. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here in Vienna with you. So I'm Cyril Mandry. So I lead Omnichannel experience globally for oncology at MSD. But actually, I spent most of my career in consumer goods. I was leading global brands like Absolut Vodka or Lipton Tea and others. So a very different world, but already very much focused on customer experience and digital when I was in consumer goods. And I transitioned to pharma about 10 years ago now. So quite a change, very different type of industry, but really enjoying it. Back to what you're saying, Benedikt, I fully agree. For me, I've never thought content was king. The customer is. It's about addressing customer needs. And one thing I saw when I joined pharma from consumer goods is how focused we are on our products. We love talking about our products, about all this efficacy, toxicity data, all that stuff, which is really important, I agree with, but first and foremost, we should ask ourselves is what our customer needs, right? We should look at the journey of the customer, understand the needs across the many stages they go through, and address all the needs, right? If all that matters to us is our product, that we're not going to be relevant most of the time. Just to give you an example, in oncology, we see many roles that the oncologist plays. Yes, he or she is a treater, but he's also a learner, trying to stay current with all the latest medical information. A teacher, educating nurses, for instance, also helping manage patients. And so the oncologists play many roles, right? So if we only come to the oncologist talking about our products, we will be irrelevant most of the time, right? So yes, content is really important, I agree with, but it's about the customer first.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Cyril, and also for highlighting a couple of the pain points and gaps already. Jan, tell us about yourself.
Yep, thanks. Also a pleasure to be here. Thanks also for the invitation to be part of this panel. My name is Jan. I'm a Belgian living in Switzerland, working at Takeda. I'm the global head for next generation customer engagement, which recently changed to digital excellence, which I think covers the scope of what we're trying to do at Takeda much better and is a little bit in line with the other organizations that we have, like medical excellence, commercial excellence. So now we've created an organization which is called Digital Excellence. I've been within the pharma company for a very long time, also shown by the gray hairs and some of the scars that I have. I've been very passionate about digital transformation in pharma for the last I would almost say close over 15 years now. And it's very interesting to see the evolution. However, we're still talking about many of the same concepts, the same challenges. And many of it is actually related to this almost myopic focus on content. And I've asked myself this question over many years, is why is it that we're so much focused on content? And of course, this is kind of like the lifeline of what we do in the pharmaceutical industry. We have to explain to our physicians, we have to provide data, we have to show to the regulatory organizations. A lot is around content, providing content. But I just want to refer to two comments that were made at the beginning of the conference. Actually, Dario's opening statement about customer experience and why it is so important, the customer experience, when you refer to the hospitality industry. And then I think in the second or the first panel, when Dana mentioned something that I actually used that comment as well, where she said, here is the content. We provide you, dear physician, now it's up to you to do something with it. And we sometimes forget that the content is just the element, but then turning it into something meaningful, that's the service component around it. And that's why we at Takeda have been, for the last years, we've been focused around looking at the services. How can we augment the use of not only our content, but our products? And also something that my dear colleague Hisham referred to is approaching the physician as a person who has very limited time available. How can we make sure that we help the physician to manage that time? Of course, looking at the content that we all provide, but also helping to solve problems. And so what problem are we solving for the physician? And it may not always be a content issue. It may actually be a logistical issue, a practical issue of how he has to deal with patients.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. You started talking about services already. Would you maybe be able to come up with an example on how actually a service might improve a customer experience?
I can give though short disclaimer, it's not going to be a pharma example right away. But I actually would like to tell you a small story. I had a very pleasant experience when flying here. And actually, it's quite similar to, I think, pharma. Like with airlines, there are a lot of airlines. They all get you from A to B, right? There are a lot of products on the market. There's things that are on the market. They treat the patient well, right? They deliver results. So my experience here was actually my pleasant experience. My flight was canceled. But it, in the end, was a pleasant experience. I got an SMS saying your flight was canceled. That was actually that early that I didn't even go to the airport yet. In that, I had a link to a chatbot. To be honest, the chatbot wasn't that good, right? He wanted me to fly first to Munich, then to Frankfurt, and then to Vienna. But after saying, like, this is not helpful, I actually got a phone number right away. So I called, and of course, waiting line. But in the waiting line, I got another SMS saying, yeah, please put in your booking code so that we can already identify you. I did that. And actually, suddenly someone said, oh, your flight is in about 1 hour. Let me help you right away, right? You bypass the complete waiting line. You directly talk to a human. We fix your problem. I talked to the lady. She didn't even know that my flight was canceled yet because their systems apparently are not that quick. But it wasn't a problem. After 10 minutes, I had a flight the next day from Zurich. So, I had first a very unpleasant experience of not arriving here on Friday, but on Saturday instead. But so, if I'm going to pick another flight, will I go to Austrian? Yeah, I would, right? Because they fixed my problem. So for me, that's now the question. What are these problems? As you said, right? How can I make sure it could be that a physician gets more time, right? By helping them to treat the patients. It could be that something that today is very cumbersome with me as a pharma company is more pleasant. These are the things, they are unfortunately very specific, so therefore I don't have the blueprint. But I know that there are cases out there, and I think, Jan, you had also cases in Takeda where you, I think, really achieved something great.
Yeah, so that was a good real life example, right? I mean, Cyril, Jan, would you have maybe one from your corporate experience?
I'll go back to what I was saying earlier, which is you need to look at the customer journey, and I mean the actual journey of the customer, not the touch point journey, not the engagement plan we designed, right? Because then you identify all the needs, all the potential things that can happen to a customer. So for us, for instance, in oncology, there's a big stage, which is how the oncologists will work with patients, manage a patient in the very long treatment phase, right? So there's a lot of opportunities for services there, apps to manage adverse events, symptoms, and so on, right? So this is a typical example of where you don't address the customer needs through content because it's not relevant, but you address it by providing the right services or solutions which will help him or her in his managing patients.
Yeah. Any builds, Jan?
Yeah, so we have an interesting example. So this is actually with in Canada, where the team was looking at for patient access, providing compassionate use. And they looked at their process that they had. There was, of course, a very regulated process. It was very well documented, included medical, supply chain, and the MSLs when asked. And so the process required the form to be filled in, the form to be faxed, to be read, to be transcribed into another system that then was maybe correct or had to be corrected, go on to another system. And so basically the lead time from the request up to the fulfillment could take up to 3 weeks, right? Now, whether that is a good benchmark or not, it was just that was the data. So when we applied agile ways of thinking, looking at processes, but adding on top of that a digital customer experience that is fully integrated into the way we work, all of a sudden now from request to approval, it now takes approximately 80% of all the requests are approved in less than 4 hours. And the fulfillment from approval to delivery of the drug is less than 2 days. So going from 21 days for compassionate use request to less than 2 days for the physician who's helping a patient is kind of a revelation, right? But not also is it good for the patient, but also we've saved quite a lot of time. It's not filling in a form with information that we already have. It's not putting it on a fax machine or scanning it and sending it over. So you really help solve the problem and give time back to the physician. And so that was a very good example that inspires us to every form that we fill in is for us an opportunity to look at, can we digitize it?
Yeah, and just to quickly build on this, because I think it's very clear from this morning when Hisham was presenting the administrative burden on HCPs and so on, that this is really an area where we can do a lot more, right, to help HCPs regain time.
Yeah, very good. Might I ask very bluntly, I mean, those were good examples, isolated examples, but we know the industry underperforms when it comes to customer experience. Still, you look at these, sorry to say, filthy budgets on how to engage with the customer. Where does it get stuck? What's the issue? What's wrong?
Oof, how much time do we have?
11:33.
Okay, so I think that if you were to ask what is a good example of customer service, digital services, customer experience, you come up with all of these examples, Amazon, Apple, you select your own. If you dissect it, is what these companies are good at is providing an integrated experience, an end-to-end thinking about the customer experience. And in pharma, we're a little bit victim of our own success, that we're in brand silos or in functional silos, right? You have the finance team, and God forbid that they talk to somebody else in commercial, or the medical team, or they for sure cannot talk to the commercial team. So this integrated approach, taking a view of what is the problem this customer is trying to solve, making the connections, that when your journey even started with the MSL, but it requires supply chain integration, how do you create visibility? That takes an architectured approach, and given the legacy of pharma, who's very siloed, either in brands or in functions, it's just hard work, and it's this legacy, transforming this legacy, I see as the biggest hurdles in getting to that, but we're making progress.
Yeah,
I would actually go even one step further, because I think this is, I mean, you're talking about all these customer-facing functions, how they can digitalize their ways of working. I think what I've seen very often actually is that like services, when they're happening, or like digitalization, it's like thought like a giveaway. Right? Previously it was pens and chili bottles and all of that stuff. Now we're creating an app here to show that we're doing something good. But I think what in the end the industry needs to decide, are we digitalizing our marketing or are we digitalizing our business? Right? And then the services, the digital services become an essential part of your offering. Right? Your product is then this equally good, as I said earlier, than your competitor, but the physician can treat the patient better because they get a better service of you. Right? And I think that's a decisive action that the company needs to take. Otherwise, you're just going to produce digital giveaways, and I mean, I think that you can better save that money.
Yeah. I mean, I fully agree with everything that you've said, the real reasons, right? I'll just add one more, which is when I look at how we drive digital transformation in our industry, it's very capability focused, tech focused, right? Before CX, before trying to transform our engagement models, right? So that leads to solving for specific problems rather than taking a holistic view of the customer and trying to look for what exactly are the needs of that customer. So I think it's more or less what you've been saying as well, but looking at it from how we think about our engagement models rather than just looking at capabilities to drive the transformation.
Yeah. Any further build, Cyril, on you know, product technology versus customer focus? What is your experience?
You want me to go back again to products?
Rub it in a little bit.
I can rub it in many times, right? I mean, that was my biggest shock when I joined the industry, is how product focused we are, right? But I understand that we've got fantastic products which save lives, right? So there's a lot to say about like our products, much more than the consumer goods product. So I get the difference. I get the expertise we need to promote our products. I just repeat myself here. If we do not ask ourselves first, who is our customer? What journey are they on? What are they trying to achieve? How can I help them end to end? Then most of the time we'll be irrelevant with our engagements because we'll only be talking about our products, which is not what they want to hear.
It's very good. So I think we talked the challenges quite a bit. What about recommendations moving forward? How do we move the needle? How do we actually arrive in this century or at least decade?
I think it's really understanding the problems we're trying to solve, right? And that may sound like a phrase, a catchphrase that we use many times often, also during the conference. But it's really understanding. Going back, I'm referring again to my good colleague Hisham about how can we help a physician to be focused more on patient, right? The patient care, allowing him or her, the physician, to be compassionate and show that empathy, taking away, looking at these administrative hurdles. It also creates more time to have, for us, the industry, to have a meaningful conversation around the data that we have. And I think looking at all the foundational elements that you need to put in place requires an architectural view of how you want to engage as an enterprise, not just as a brand, with a particular physician, but take an integrated view at all your touch points and recognizing the person that you're engaging with as providing that excellent experience, right? So that feeling gets carried over in the next touch point, which may be with a completely different organization, but it leaves a good feeling when you interact with Takeda. So take that integrated view.
Benedikt, from your perspective, I mean, you work with different companies. What would be your recommendation consulting them?
So I've seen companies producing good services, and as I said earlier, I think they are very specific to your product, because actually it's not that you don't need the product, right? They need to be around the product. So actually, I was wondering how many brand managers do we actually have here? Like, are there brand managers, or are we all rather the digital something folks? Yeah, no hand. So
it's dangerous to raise
and I
hand.
think that's a problem. right? Because the good services, we're not going to invent the good services, right? Because the services evolve around your product, they evolve around your medical people, maybe around your R&D people. And as long as we don't manage to get this idea to them, I don't understand why, for example, brand plan should not just have the claims and the key messages in it, but actually the key services. Then we're not going to be successful.
Yeah. So when I look at my own experience at MSD, how we move the needle is first we need to look at the patient-centric, right? Look at the patient journey, and then you see where services can play a role. For instance, in oncology, we saw early detection to get to faster diagnosis, one area. Treatment-related services, like summarized data and so on for the oncologist. The third area is what I mentioned earlier, remote adverse events management or remote or patient symptoms management. So when you look at the patient journey, you identify some areas where you can really play, where there's a gap. So patient centricity is one, and focus. Don't try to do services everywhere. Pick a few areas where you can make a difference. And that's pretty what I would do. And also, the third one, as with AI, as with everything, test and learn, right? Do a number of experiments, see what works, stop the ones which are not working, and grow the main ones.
It's very good. I hope we have time for one or two questions. Please, can we have the mic here in the second row? Thanks for doing that. I give you the money later. Yeah.
So specifically question to you, Cyril. You said you were coming from the consumer good companies and with that experience. And we have been talking about silos quite a lot, and that it's a big showstopper for providing a very proper experience to pharmaceutical companies. And we know that there's plenty of regulations that limit some certain information being provided and so on. Would you say that there are some key takeaways from the consumer good companies that you would bring into the pharmaceuticals? That's, like a learning.
So just because I missed the beginning, did you talk about MLR process, or what was the hurdle you mentioned?
I was mentioning the process of there's so many silos right now within the information, within the customer experience as a whole for the patient experience. So. Yeah.
So what I always say is in consumer goods, it's like most BCMs, brand managers are like customer natives. The first question they ask themselves is, who's my customer? What are the needs, right? Where I feel we're more product natives in our industry. So the first thing I would try to bring is this stronger customer focus, really trying to start from the customer needs. So, and another one is data. We are not talking too much about data today, in the context of AI, but how do we get to the 360 view of the customer? So that's more for personalization, but also it can also help get to the right services. That's definitely something which is probably easier to do in consumer goods because you've got access to a lot more data, but I think the more we try in our industry, the better. Just a couple of initial thoughts, but there's many more things I'm sure we could come up with.
Thanks for your question. Would anyone else have a question quickly? I think we can sneak one in. If that's not the case, maybe you mentioned a couple of examples, but you have a very long-term experience in the industry. You saw many companies, you've consulted many. Any other best practices you want to share with around? Anything else?
So I think we should challenge ourselves. How good are we at offering very basic foundational, even call it digital needs, right? So think about managing your consent. Can you go online to any service provider that you as a private person interact with? And the question in many cases is, if you have created a digital identity with that company, you will be able to consult your consent. So ask yourself the question for everybody in the room here, can anybody from any digital touch point that you have go online and consult their consent, and change it, check their preferences and change it? And does it have an immediate effect in the marketing that is done? It's a very foundational digital, right? It doesn't have to be very sophisticated services. It's very digital digital right? Are we as a pharma company or the pharma industry transparent in how we manage digital relationships with anybody that we digitally interact with? So a simple example, don't forget the basics.
It's perfect how you talk to the audience and look at the clock at the very same time. Landing on point. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.